I never thought a carving knife would be the thing that finally set me free. That Thanksgiving dinner in Northwood, Pennsylvania, the one where my stepfather Frank held a blade to my arm in front of everyone, wasn't the worst thing he'd ever done to me. But it was the last. Because sometimes it's not the biggest hurt that breaks you. Sometimes it's just the one that happens when you've finally had enough of being small, of being silent, of letting people steal from you while you smile and say thank you. My name is Evelyn Carter, and this is the story of how I took back everything they stole from me. Growing up, I learned early that love in my family came with conditions. My father, Michael, died when I was 8 years old. A sudden heart attack at 42, leaving behind a confused little girl, a modest life insurance policy, and an education trust fund he'd scrimped and saved to build for me. I don't remember much about him except the smell of his aftershave and the way he'd read to me every night before bed, his voice steady and warm like a blanket. 6 months after we buried him, my mother Brenda started seeing Frank Morrison. He worked at the steel plant on the outskirts of town, drank Yuengling like it was water, and had a laugh that sounded like gravel in a blender. Mom said he made her feel safe. I was too young to understand that safety and control aren't the same thing. They got married when I was 9, in a small ceremony at the courthouse. Frank moved into our house, the one my father had almost finished paying off. Within a year, everything that had been my dad's was gone. The bookshelves, the tools in the garage, even the photos on the mantle got reduced to just one, shoved in the back where you could barely see it. Frank said Mom needed to move on, that it wasn't healthy to live in the past. I tried to be good. God, I tried so hard to be what they wanted. I kept my room clean, got straight A's, never asked for anything. When Mom had Kevin 2 years after the wedding, I became the built-in babysitter. I'd come home from school and take care of my baby brother while Mom worked double shifts at the diner, and Frank spent his evenings at the bar or in front of the TV watching the Steelers. Nobody ever asked me if I minded. It was just expected. The first time I noticed something was wrong with my college fund, I was 16. I'd gone to the bank with Mom to deposit my paycheck from my part-time job at the library. While we were there, I asked about the education trust my father had set up. The teller looked uncomfortable, glanced at my mother, then said the balance was much lower than I'd expected. When I asked why, Mom quickly changed the subject and rushed me out of there. That night, I heard her and Frank arguing in their bedroom. His voice was loud, slurred. "I told you not to let her check that account. The girl's too nosy for her own good." Mom's response was quieter, but I caught the words, "had no choice," and "your gambling debts." I felt something crack inside me that night, but I pushed it down. I told myself I must have misunderstood, that my mother wouldn't let him steal my future, that maybe there was a reasonable explanation. There wasn't. I found out years later, after I'd already put myself through community college and then transferred to the University of Texas at Austin on loans and scholarships, that Frank had systematically drained my trust fund. Nearly $400,000 over the course of 15 years. Money my father had saved, money from his life insurance, money that was supposed to give me a start in life. Frank used it to buy trucks, to renovate the house, to pay off bookies when his sports betting got out of hand, and my mother let him. She signed the papers. She forged my father's signature on documents. She looked me in the eye for years and told me there just wasn't enough money for college, that I'd have to make my own way. But I didn't know the full extent of it then. I was too busy surviving. Kevin grew up golden. He was the biological son of the marriage, the one who could do no wrong. When he wrecked his first car at 17, Frank bought him another one. When he flunked out of community college, it was laughed off as boys being boys. Meanwhile, I'd been working since I was 14, paying for my own clothes, my own school supplies, my own everything. Mom always had an excuse. "Frank works hard, he deserves to relax. Kevin's going through a tough time. You're older, Evelyn, you should understand." What I understood was that I didn't matter to them. Not really. I was useful when they needed something, a wallet to borrow from, a babysitter to call, a scapegoat when things went wrong. But I was never truly seen as part of the family. After high school, I couldn't get away fast enough. I moved to Austin for college, taking out loans that would follow me for decades. I studied finance and marketing, driven by some deep need to understand money, to never be vulnerable the way my mother had made me vulnerable. I worked 2 jobs while taking a full course load. I graduated with honors and got a decent job at a tech startup. I thought distance would help. I thought if I just became successful enough, independent enough, they'd finally respect me. I was wrong. They called when they needed things. Mom would use her sad voice, talking about how tight money was, how Frank's hours had been cut at the plant, how Kevin needed help with rent. And like an idiot, I'd send money. Not much, because I didn't have much, but enough. 100 here, 200 there, it added up. Over 5 years after college, I probably sent them $15,000. I never saw a penny back. They never even said thank you. The worst part was that I kept hoping that if I was generous enough, kind enough, giving enough, they'd finally see me. They'd finally appreciate me. They'd finally love me the way I needed to be loved. Every year, I'd go back to Northwood for Thanksgiving. It was torture, but it was family. Frank would be drunk by noon, sprawled on the couch watching football, barking orders at everyone. Kevin would brag about whatever new toy he'd bought, conveniently forgetting to mention he was 3 months behind on rent. Mom would flutter around playing hostess, pretending everything was perfect while the tension in the house could cut glass. And I'd sit there, smiling, helping in the kitchen, keeping my mouth shut. This last Thanksgiving, I was 33 years old. I'd been sending them money for years. I'd been swallowing my pride for decades. I'd been making myself smaller and quieter and more convenient for my entire life. The breaking point started 2 weeks before the holiday. Kevin called me, which was unusual. He never called unless he wanted something. He was excited, talking fast about this amazing deal he'd gotten on a brand new Ford F-150, top of the line, all the bells and whistles. How much? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. $45,000, he said, like it was nothing. But I got a great interest rate. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. 2 months earlier, Kevin had called me crying, begging for $3,000 to cover rent and car insurance. He said he'd pay me back within 6 weeks, swore on our mother's life. I'd sent the money from my savings, money I'd been putting aside for a down payment on a condo. Kevin, I said carefully, where did you get the money for a down payment on a truck? Oh, Mom helped me out, she's the best. The best. Right. I hung up and called my mother. She was defensive immediately, which told me everything I needed to know. Where did you get $3,000 to give Kevin when 2 months ago you called me begging for help with the electric bill? Evelyn, don't start. Kevin needed reliable transportation for his job. He needed reliable transportation, so you gave him my money? The money I sent you? It's not your money once you give it to me. And Kevin is family. He needed help. I'm family too, Mom. There was a long pause. Then she said, in that tired voice she used when she wanted me to feel guilty, "You have a good job, Evelyn. You're doing fine. Your brother is struggling. I don't understand why you have to be so selfish about this." Selfish. The word hit me like a slap. I'd been supporting them for years, and I was selfish. I should have known then. I should have stopped it right there. But old habits die hard, and the little girl inside me still desperately wanted her mother's approval. So I went home for Thanksgiving. The house looked the same as it always did. A little more run down, a little more cluttered. Frank had added a new flat-screen TV in the living room, massive and expensive looking. The Steelers game was already on, volume cranked up. He was in his recliner, the one with the beer holder in the arm, a nearly empty case of Yuengling beside him. "Well, look who decided to show up," he said without looking at me, the big city girl. "Hi, Frank." I didn't call him Dad. I'd never called him Dad. Kevin's truck was parked in the driveway, gleaming and ostentatious. He was in the kitchen with Mom, showing her something on his phone. When I walked in, he barely glanced up. "Hey sis, nice of you to finally visit." I'd been there for Christmas. It was November, but I bit my tongue. The neighbors arrived around 2. The Hendersons from next door, the Kowalskis from down the street. Mom liked to invite people over for Thanksgiving, liked to play the role of the perfect hostess. I think it made her feel successful, having a full house and a big meal. Never mind that I'd paid for half the groceries. Dinner was tense from the start. Frank was on his 7th or 8th beer, getting louder with each one. Kevin kept making digs at me, little comments about how I'd gotten too good for my hometown, how I probably didn't even remember what real American food tasted like in Austin with all those fancy restaurants. I helped Mom serve, carrying dishes to the table, refilling drinks, playing the role I'd been assigned since childhood. The good daughter, the helpful one, the invisible one. Frank's team was losing. That was the first problem. He kept swearing at the TV, which we could hear from the dining room. The second problem was that he'd run out of beer. "Evelyn," he barked from the living room. "Get me another Yuengling from the fridge." I was in the middle of carrying the turkey to the table. "I'm a little busy right now, Frank. Can you get it yourself?" The room went quiet. You'd have thought I'd suggested he go to hell. He appeared in the doorway, face red, eyes unfocused. "What did you just say to me?" "I said I'm busy. The kitchen's right there. You can get your own beer." I don't know where the words came from. Maybe I was tired. Maybe something in me had finally broken. Maybe I'd just reached the point where I couldn't pretend anymore. Frank crossed the room faster than a drunk man should be able to move. "You ungrateful little bitch. In my house, you do what I tell you." "It's not your house," I said quietly. "It was my father's house." I saw his hand clench into a fist, and for a second I thought he was going to hit me. Mom stood up, making worried noises. The neighbors looked uncomfortable, like they wanted to be anywhere else. Then Frank did something I didn't expect. He grabbed the carving knife from the table, the one Mom had just been using to cut the turkey. He didn't stab me. He wasn't that far gone. But he grabbed my arm, hard enough to bruise, and pressed the blade against my skin. "You need to learn some respect," he said, his breath hot and sour in my face. He dragged the knife along my forearm, not deep, but enough to break the skin. Enough to make me bleed. It was a thin line of red, almost delicate, but it burned like fire. "Frank!" Mom rushed over, pulling him back. "Oh my God, what did you do?" He dropped my arm, stumbling back toward his chair. She was asking for it, disrespectful little. Mom grabbed me, pulled me toward the kitchen. The neighbors were frozen. Mrs. Henderson with her hand over her mouth. Kevin was smirking. Actually smirking. "It's fine," Mom said loudly, her voice shrill. "It's just a little accident. Evelyn's always been a bit dramatic. Come on, honey, let's get you cleaned up." She dragged me into the kitchen, away from the witnesses. Her grip on my uninjured arm was tight enough to hurt. "Don't make a scene," she hissed, shoving a paper towel at me. "What will the neighbors think?" I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd given birth to me, who was supposed to protect me, who'd spent 25 years choosing everyone else over me. "I don't care what they think, Mom." "Well, I do. This is embarrassing enough without you making it worse." Making it worse. I was bleeding because her husband had assaulted me, and I was making it worse. Something inside me went very quiet. Very still. "You're right," I said calmly. "I'm sorry." She looked relieved. "That's my girl. Now clean yourself up and come back to dinner. We have guests." I went to the bathroom instead, locked the door, washed the blood off my arm and examined the cut. It wasn't deep enough to need stitches, but it was deliberate. You could see exactly where the blade had traced a line across my skin. I took out my phone and photographed it. Multiple angles, good lighting. Close-ups of the cut, wider shots showing my face and the blood. I sent them to a folder in my cloud storage labeled Evidence. I'd started that folder years ago, whenever something particularly bad happened. Photos of bruises from when Frank had grabbed me too hard. Screenshots of text messages showing Kevin borrowing money. Records of every dollar I'd sent home. I'd kept it all, some part of me knowing I might need it someday. I cleaned the wound, put a bandage on it, and went back out to dinner. Everyone was pretending nothing had happened. Frank was back in front of the TV. The neighbors were eating quietly, not meeting my eyes. Kevin was loading his plate with seconds. Mom gave me a tight smile. "There you are, sweetheart. Feeling better?" "Much better," I said. I sat down and finished my dinner. I smiled. I made small talk. I helped clear the plates and serve the pie. And I decided that this was the last time. Not in an emotional, dramatic way. It was calmer than that. It was like a switch flipping in my brain. A decision made with absolute certainty. I was done. Done pretending. Done hoping. Done sacrificing myself for people who'd never loved me. I was going to burn their world down, and I was going to smile while I did it. After dinner, I made my excuses and left early. Said I had to work the next day, that I'd had a wonderful time, all the usual lies. Mom hugged me at the door, and I let her. Frank didn't bother getting up from his chair. "Drive safe," Kevin called after me, and I could hear the mockery in his voice. I drove back to Austin that night instead of staying over like I'd planned. 6 hours in the dark, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Then I started making other calls. The first was to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one who specialized in financial fraud and elder abuse. I explained the situation, sent her my evidence folder, and asked what my options were. She was quiet for a long time after reviewing everything. Then she said, "Miss Carter, I think we need to meet in person, and you should probably bring any other documentation you have. This is serious." The second call was harder. It was to my grandmother, my father's mother, Patricia Morrison. She'd been at that Thanksgiving dinner 25 years ago, the last one before my father died. After he passed, Mom had slowly cut her out of our lives. Too many questions, too much interference. I'd seen her maybe a dozen times in the last 2 decades, always briefly, always with Mom hovering nearby. I didn't have her number memorized, had to look it up online. When she answered, her voice was wary. "Grandma Pat? It's Evelyn." There was a long pause. "Evelyn, is everything all right?" "No," I said, "it's really not, and I need your help." We met 3 days later at a diner, halfway between Austin and Northwood. She was 82 now, but still sharp as a tack. Retired nurse, the kind of woman who didn't take nonsense from anyone. She ordered coffee and pie and listened while I told her everything. When I was done, she was quiet for a long time. Then she opened her purse and pulled out a manila folder. "I've been waiting for this conversation for 20 years, she said. Inside the folder was a copy of my father's will, the original trust documents for my education fund, bank statements showing the withdrawals, each one stamped with my mother's forged signature. And something I didn't expect, a recording on an old cassette tape. "What's this?" I asked. "About 10 years ago, I confronted your mother." Asked her point blank about the money. She broke down, told me everything. I recorded it. She looked me in the eye. "I've been documenting everything I could, waiting for the day you'd be ready to do something about it. Why didn't you tell me?" Because you had to come to this decision yourself. If I'd pushed you, you'd have felt guilty. You'd have backed down. I needed you to be ready. She was right. 5 years ago, I'd have made excuses. I'd have convinced myself it wasn't that bad. I'd have protected them because some broken part of me still wanted them to love me. But that part was dead now. Frank had killed it with a carving knife. Grandma Pat and I spent the next month preparing. The lawyer was thorough, building a case that would hold up in court. We had evidence of fraud, forgery, financial abuse. We had my medical records showing bruises and injuries over the years. We had Kevin's texts asking for money, Mom's calls begging for help. We had everything documented, dated, notarized. We could go to court, the lawyer said. You'd probably win, but it would take years and cost a fortune. What's the alternative? She smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. We scare them. We show them everything we have, let them know exactly what they're facing, and offer them a choice. Make restitution or go to jail. Would they actually go to jail? For this much money, forged over this many years? Absolutely. I thought about it. About Frank sitting in a cell. About Mom losing everything. About Kevin watching his perfect life crumble. Let's do it, I said. Grandma Pat suggested the setting. Sunday dinner at her house. She'd host. A reconciliation, she told Mom on the phone. After the unfortunate incident at Thanksgiving, she wanted the family to come together. Mom agreed immediately. She loved the idea of smoothing things over, of pretending nothing had happened. Frank would come for a free meal. Kevin would come because Mom would make him. What they didn't know was who else would be there. That Sunday, I drove to Northwood with my lawyer and a forensic accountant. Grandma Pat had also invited 2 of her friends from church, the Baileys, a couple who'd known my father and who'd been quietly disapproving of Mom's choices for years. And she'd invited the sheriff, Tom Rodriguez, who'd gone to high school with my dad and owed Grandma Pat a favor. They arrived right at 6, expecting a normal dinner. The look on Mom's face when she walked in and saw the extra people was priceless. Confusion, then worry, then forced brightness as she tried to figure out what was going on. Patricia, you didn't mention we'd have so much company, she said, her voice tight. Sit down, Brenda, Grandma Pat said. All of you. Saturday Frank looked belligerent, already defensive. Kevin kept glancing at his phone, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Mom was twisting her napkin in her lap. We had dinner first. Grandma Pat insisted. Pot roast and potatoes, green beans, homemade rolls. No one talked much. The tension was thick enough to choke on. When the plates were cleared and coffee was served, my lawyer stood up. I'm Rebecca Santos, she said. I represent Evelyn Carter in a case of financial fraud, forgery, and theft. Frank surged to his feet. What the hell is this? Sheriff Rodriguez stood too, one hand resting casually on his belt. Sit down, Frank. Frank Saturday, Rebecca pulled out a laptop and connected it to Grandma Pat's TV. She pulled up a spreadsheet, color-coded and detailed. This, she said, is a comprehensive accounting of the Education Trust Fund established by Michael Carter for his daughter Evelyn. The initial deposit was $50,000. Over the 18 years before Evelyn turned 21, it should have grown to approximately $410,000. She clicked to the next slide. It showed the actual balance. When Evelyn turned 21, there was $6,000 left. Mom made a small sound. Kevin's eyes were wide. This next slide shows every withdrawal. Each one was made with a forged signature. Each one is a felony. The slides continued. Every truck Frank had bought, every vacation they'd taken, every bail payment for Kevin's DUIs, every gambling debt. It was all there, cross-referenced with bank statements and receipts. In total, Rebecca said, Frank and Brenda Morrison have stolen $404,000 from Evelyn Carter over a period of 23 years. Now wait just a goddamn minute, Frank started. I'm not done. Rebecca's voice was steel. In addition to the theft of the trust fund, Frank Morrison also used Evelyn's social security number to open 3 credit cards when she was a minor. He defaulted on all of them, destroying her credit before she was even old enough to know what credit was. She turned to Kevin. And you, Mr. Morrison, have borrowed approximately $15,000 from your sister over the past 5 years. You've repaid none of it. Kevin opened his mouth, then closed it. Brenda Morrison, Rebecca continued, you've borrowed an additional $12,000 directly, with promises of repayment. None has been made. Mom was crying now, silent tears running down her face, but I felt nothing, just cold satisfaction. Rebecca clicked to the next slide. It was the photo of my arm from Thanksgiving, the cut from the carving knife stark in red. And then there's the assault. Mom gasped. It was an accident. We have 6 witnesses who say otherwise, including your neighbors, the Hendersons, who've already given statements. You went to our neighbors? Mom looked at me like I'd betrayed her. You held me down while your husband cut me, I said. It was the first time I'd spoken. What did you think I was going to do? Smile and pretend it was fine? Grandma Pat pulled out the cassette player. It looked ancient, but it worked. She pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room, younger, more broken than it was now. Frank needed the money to cover his gambling debts. He was in deep, Pat. They were going to hurt him. I didn't have a choice. I know it was Evelyn's money. I know Michael wanted it for her education, but I couldn't let them hurt Frank. I just couldn't. The room was silent when it ended. This was 10 years ago, Grandma Pat said. 10 years, and you kept stealing. Frank exploded. You set us up. You fucking set us up, you old bitch. Sheriff Rodriguez stepped forward. One more word like that, Frank, and I'm taking you in right now for threatening a witness. Frank's face was purple with rage, but he shut his mouth. Rebecca pulled out a document. You have 2 options. Option 1. Tomorrow morning, I file criminal charges for fraud, forgery, identity theft, and assault. Given the amount and duration of the theft, you're looking at 20 years minimum. Brenda, you're an accomplice, so you're looking at 10. Kevin, you're not criminally liable for the loans, but you can be sued civilly. She paused. Option 2, you sign this agreement, you sell this house, which was Michael Carter's property and never should have been in your names. All proceeds go to Evelyn as partial restitution. You liquidate any assets, you set up a payment plan for the remaining balance, and you leave Northwood within 30 days. You can't make us leave our home, Mom whispered. It's not your home, I said. It was my father's home. You stole it, just like you stole everything else. Evelyn, please, Mom reached for me across the table. We're family. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't let you get hurt to protect a drunk. Family doesn't make you feel worthless your entire life. I stood up and walked around the table, putting the papers in front of them. You have 60 seconds to decide. Sign, or I file charges in the morning. You'd really send us to prison? Mom asked. Your own mother? You really stole my entire future, I replied. Your own daughter. Frank grabbed the pen. He knew he was beaten. He signed without reading it, angry scratching motions. Kevin signed, his hand shaking. Mom was last. She looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in decades. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sure you are, I said. Now sign. She did. The next month was busy. The house went on the market immediately. It sold in 2 weeks. Small townhouses were cheap, and this one was well maintained. The profit wasn't enough to cover what they'd stolen, not by half, but it was a start. Frank and Brenda moved to a tiny apartment on the other side of Pittsburgh. He lost his job at the plant once word got around about what had happened. Small towns talk, and Northwood talked about nothing else for months. He ended up working night shifts at a warehouse, loading trucks. Kevin sold his precious truck. He moved into a studio apartment that smelled like mildew and defeated dreams. Mom called me once a week at first, then once a month. I never answered. She left voicemails, begging for forgiveness, explaining that she'd been scared, that Frank had controlled her, that she'd made mistakes. Maybe some of that was true. Probably some of it was. But it didn't matter anymore. She'd made her choices, over and over again, for 25 years, and she'd never chosen me. I kept the house. Technically it was mine now, but I didn't want to live there. Too many ghosts, too many bad memories. Instead, I rented it to a young family who'd just moved to town, a single mother with 2 kids who needed a fresh start. I charged her half of what I could have gotten on the open market. Grandma Pat said it was fitting. With the restitution payments set up and the settlement from the trust fund fraud, I finally had money. Not all of what was stolen. Probably never would get all of it back, but enough. Enough to pay off my student loans. Enough to put a down payment on a condo in Austin. Enough to feel secure. More than the money, though, I had something I'd never had before. Peace. I stopped jumping every time my phone rang. I stopped feeling guilty when I spent money on myself. I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to tell me I wasn't good enough, wasn't doing enough, wasn't enough. I started therapy. Turns out, growing up in that kind of environment does things to you, makes you believe things about yourself that aren't true. It took months to start unpacking it all, and I'm still working on it. 6 months after that dinner, I applied to the MBA program at the Macomb School of Business at UT Austin. I got in with a partial scholarship. Between that and the restitution payments, I could afford it. I was sitting in a coffee shop near campus, one of those trendy places with exposed brick and local art on the walls, working on a group project with my classmates. We were developing a business plan for a startup, and I was in charge of the financial projections. I was good at it, better than I'd expected. Turned out, obsessively tracking every penny for years, because you never knew when you'd lose everything, made you pretty sharp with numbers. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Evelyn? Mom's voice, thin and desperate. Oh, thank God. Honey, I didn't know who else to call. I should have hung up right then. But curiosity made me wait. What do you want, Brenda? I didn't call her Mom anymore. Hadn't since that dinner. It's Frank. He's sick. Really sick. Cancer. He needs treatment, but we don't have insurance, and I don't know what to do, and I know you're angry. I know we hurt you, but please, baby. We need help. There was a time when that call would have destroyed me, when I'd have felt guilty enough to send money I didn't have, to put myself in debt to save them one more time. But I looked around the coffee shop at my new friends, at my laptop full of dreams and plans, at the life I was building from the ashes they'd left me with. I looked out the window at the Austin sunshine, bright and clean and nothing like Northwood. I think you have the wrong number, I said calmly. Evelyn, please, I'm begging you. I hung up, blocked the number. One of my classmates, Sarah, looked at me with concern. Everything okay? Yeah, I said, and meant it. Everything's perfect. My phone buzzed with a text from Grandma Pat. Just checking in, sweetheart. How are you doing? I smiled and typed back. I'm good, Grandma. Really good. She responded immediately. Your father would be so proud of you. That made me tear up a little, but they were good tears. Clean tears. I'd spent so many years trying to be good enough for people who'd never see me. Trying to earn love from people who didn't know how to give it. Trying to fix relationships that were broken from the start. I was done trying. These days, I focus on building instead. Building a career I'm proud of. Building friendships with people who respect me. Building a life where I'm not afraid, not guilty, not small. The debt Frank and Brenda owe me gets paid in small increments each month. It'll take them 20 years to pay it all back. They'll be old by then, if they make it that long. Kevin stopped making payments after 6 months. I could take him to court, but I won't. He's not worth the energy. Sometimes I think about forgiving them. Not for their sake, but for mine. Therapy says holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting them to die. But I don't think what I feel is anger anymore. It's more like indifference. They're just people I used to know. People who hurt me, people I've moved on from. Last month, I got a card in the mail. It was from Mom, forwarded through Grandma Pat because I'd changed my address and made sure they didn't have it. Inside was a photo of her and Frank. They looked old, worn down, smaller somehow. The note said, "We miss you, please call." I threw it away without a second thought. That same week, I got an email from the MBA program. I'd been selected for a summer internship at a Fortune 500 company in San Francisco. Competitive salary, potential for a full-time offer after graduation. I called Grandma Pat first. She cried happy tears and said she'd always known I was destined for great things. That night, I went out with friends to celebrate. We laughed and drank overpriced cocktails and made plans for the future. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd thought about Northwood, about Frank, about that life. I'd won. Not because I'd destroyed them, though I guess I had. Not because I'd gotten my money back, though some of it anyway. I'd won because I'd taken my life back. I'd stopped letting them define me, control me, make me small. The girl who'd let Frank cut her arm and then smiled through dessert was gone. The girl who'd sent money she couldn't afford because maybe this time they'd love her was gone. The girl who'd believed she deserved to be treated that way was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, who set boundaries and kept them, who chose people who chose her back, who understood that family was something you built, not something you were trapped by. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I didn't even check it. Just swiped it away and went back to my friends, my celebration, my life. A year later, I graduated with my MBA, top of my class. Grandma Pat came to the ceremony, beaming with pride. She was the only family I needed there. We took photos together, her in her best dress, me in my cap and gown, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. In a way, we had. The San Francisco internship turned into a full-time offer, senior financial analyst at a tech company you'd recognize if I named it. 6-figure salary, stock options, benefits that actually covered therapy. I bought a condo in Oakland with a view of the bay. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Really mine. No one could take it from me. I dated a little. That was hard at first. Trusting people, letting them in, believing they wanted me for me, not what I could do for them. I made mistakes, chose wrong a few times, but I learned. I got better at seeing red flags, at walking away when something didn't feel right. Eventually, I met someone good. A software engineer named Marcus who made me laugh and didn't think twice about splitting the check, who asked about my day and actually listened to the answer, who met Grandma Pat and charmed her within 5 minutes by asking about her nursing career and actually caring about the stories. We took things slow. I was honest with him about my family, about why I didn't talk to them. He didn't push, didn't try to fix it, just held space for my hurt and my healing. You're not responsible for other people's choices, he told me once, not even your mother's. Simple words, but they meant everything. Grandma Pat got sick when I was 36, pneumonia that turned into something worse. I flew back to Pennsylvania every weekend for 2 months, sitting by her hospital bed, holding her hand. I'm so proud of you, she told me near the end. Your father would be too. You didn't just survive, honey, you thrived. Because of you, I said. You saved me. No. She squeezed my hand with what strength she had left. You saved yourself. I just gave you the tools. She passed on a Tuesday morning with me, holding one hand and her pastor holding the other. She left me everything. Not much, her house and some savings, but she'd added a note to her will that made me cry. To my granddaughter Evelyn, who learned the hardest lesson, that sometimes love means letting go. I sold her house, couldn't bear to keep it empty, and I didn't need it. I donated half the proceeds to a women's shelter in Northwood, in her name and my father's. The other half went into a trust I set up for future scholarships for kids in the foster system or abusive homes, kids like I'd been, who needed a way out. The day after Grandma Pat's funeral, Mom showed up at the service. I hadn't invited her, hadn't even told her when it was happening. But small towns talk, and someone must have mentioned it. She looked old, older than 62 should look. Her hair was gray and thin, her clothes shabby. Frank wasn't with her. I learned later he'd died 6 months earlier. The cancer had won. She tried to approach me after the service. I saw her coming and turned away, walked in the other direction. She followed. Evelyn, please. Just 5 minutes. I stopped, turned around, looked at her. What do you want, Brenda? She flinched at the name. I wanted to say I'm sorry, for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know. You've had 30 years to be sorry. You only are now because you've lost everything. That's not true, but her eyes said it was. I loved you. I still do. You're my daughter. No, I said, and my voice was steady, calm, final. I was your daughter. But you traded that in for Frank, for Kevin, for an easy life where you didn't have to face what you'd done. You made your choice. I was scared. Frank, he wasn't a good man. I know that now, but I was scared of being alone, of losing the house, of not being able to take care of Kevin. You weren't scared of losing me, though. That stopped her. She opened her mouth, closed it. Tears started running down her face. I'm alone now, she whispered. Kevin won't talk to me. Blames me for everything. Frank's gone. I have no one. Something in me wanted to feel sorry for her, the little girl who'd loved her mother, who desperately wanted to be loved back. But that little girl was gone, buried alongside the woman who could have been her mother but chose not to be. That's not my problem, I said. I walked away. Got in my rental car and drove back to the airport. Flew back to San Francisco, to Marcus, to my real life. I didn't look back. Marcus asked me that night how I was doing. We were on the couch in our apartment. He'd moved in 6 months earlier, and I was curled against his side. I'm okay, I said. I think I'm actually okay. You don't have to be. I know, but I am. He kissed the top of my head. Your grandma would be proud. He was right. She would be. The restitution payments stopped after Frank died. Mom couldn't keep them up on her own. I could have pursued it, dragged her to court, bled her dry. But what was the point? I had enough, more than enough, and making her suffer wasn't going to heal what was broken in me. I just let it go. Kevin reached out a year later. A long email, rambling and half-coherent, about how he'd been in therapy, how he'd realized how toxic our family had been, how sorry he was. He wanted to make amends, wanted to be siblings again. I read it twice, then deleted it. Maybe he was sincere. Maybe he'd actually changed. But I didn't owe him my time or my energy to find out. I'd spent too many years giving people second chances, third chances, infinite chances, hoping they'd finally treat me right. I was done hoping, done giving, done with people who'd hurt me, expecting me to help them feel better about it. My inbox stayed quiet after that. Life moved forward. Marcus proposed on a trip to Hawaii. We got married on a beach at sunset, just the two of us and an officiant. No family drama, no uncomfortable questions about why my mother wasn't there. Just us, making promises we intended to keep. We bought a house in Berkeley, had a daughter 2 years later, named her Patricia after Grandma Pat. When I held her for the first time, small and perfect and trusting, I made her a promise. No one will ever make you feel worthless. No one will ever steal from you. And if they try, I'll burn the world down to protect you. Marcus kissed my forehead. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. I meant it. Every day with her was a gift, a chance to be the mother I'd never had, to show her what real love looked like, to teach her that she was valuable, worthy, enough, just by existing. Some nights, when I was rocking her to sleep, I'd think about Mom, about whether she'd ever held me like this, whether she'd ever felt this fierce protective love. I thought maybe she had, once, before Frank, before the fear, before the choices that led her down a path where she'd sacrifice her own child to keep a man who wasn't worth keeping. I felt sorry for her then, not enough to call, not enough to forgive, but enough to understand that she'd made herself small too. She'd traded her dignity, her integrity, her relationship with her daughter, all for a man who'd never deserved any of it. She'd been a victim too, in her way. But she'd also made me a victim, and I couldn't forgive that. Patricia, my daughter, would never know that kind of conditional love. She'd never wonder if she was good enough. She'd never have to earn affection or buy approval. She'd just be loved, period. That was my revenge in the end. Not the money, not the public humiliation, not watching them lose everything. My revenge was living well, living free, being happy in a way they'd never allowed me to be. Work was good. I moved up fast, became a director, then a VP. Made more money than I knew what to do with. Invested it smartly, having learned from Frank's mistakes what not to do. Set up college funds for Patricia and any other kids we might have. Bought Marcus's parents a new car when theirs died, because they'd welcomed me into their family without question or condition. I traveled. Paris, Tokyo, Buenos Aires. Saw the world I'd only dreamed about when I was a girl trapped in Northwood, counting pennies and hoping for escape. I gave back. Volunteered with organizations that helped abuse survivors. Mentored young women in finance. Donated to causes that mattered. Used my money and my voice for good. And I was happy. Not in a loud, obvious way. Not like the movies where the music swells and everything is perfect, but in a quiet, steady way that felt like coming home to myself. On Patricia's 5th birthday, we had a party at our house. Friends, neighbors, kids from her preschool. Marcus grilled burgers, I made a cake from scratch, and the yard was full of laughter and sunshine. I was standing on the porch watching it all when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello? Evelyn, Kevin's voice, older and tired. Don't hang up, please. I should have, but curiosity won again. What do you want? Mom died. I felt nothing, just a kind of distant acknowledgement. When? Last week. Heart attack. It was fast. Okay. The funeral's on Saturday. I thought you should know. Thanks for letting me know. A pause. Are you going to come? No. She was your mother, Evelyn. She stopped being my mother a long time ago, Kevin. You were there. You watched it happen. I know. His voice cracked. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. For all of it. I was a shit brother. I took advantage of you. I stood by while they hurt you. And I'm sorry. Part of me wanted to tell him it was okay, that I forgave him, but it wouldn't be true. I appreciate you telling me, I said, but I won't be at the funeral. I understand. He sounded like he was crying. For what it's worth, she talked about you at the end. Said her biggest regret was losing you. Her biggest regret should have been what she did to lose me. Yeah. A long sigh. Yeah, it should have been. Take care of yourself, Kevin. I hung up before he could respond. Blocked the number. Marcus came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist. Everything okay? My mother died. He turned me around, searched my face. Are you okay? Yeah, I really am. And I was. That night, after Patricia was asleep and the house was quiet, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and thought about the journey I'd taken. From the girl who'd smiled through abuse to the woman who'd walked away. From the daughter who'd desperately sought approval to the mother who gave it freely. From the victim to the survivor to someone who'd thrived. It hadn't been easy. There'd been therapy sessions where I'd cried so hard I couldn't breathe. Nights when the old guilt crept in, whispering that I should have tried harder, should have been more forgiving, should have fixed it. But I hadn't fixed it. I'd left it. And that had been the right choice. I thought about Frank, dead from cancer. About Mom, alone at the end. About Kevin, carrying guilt that came too late to matter. And I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Just neutral acceptance that they'd lived their lives and faced their consequences, and none of it had anything to do with me anymore. I'd spent so many years letting them define me. The rejected daughter, the stolen from child, the family scapegoat. I'd carried those identities like chains, heavy and cold. But I'd broken free, melted down those chains and forged something new. A life of my own choosing. A family that chose me back. A future that was mine. Marcus came out with a blanket, wrapped it around my shoulders. Penny, for your thoughts? I was just thinking, I said, about how far I've come. He kissed my temple. Pretty far. Yeah, I smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached my eyes and my heart. Yeah, I have. The moon was bright over Berkeley. Inside, our daughter slept safe and loved. Beside me, my husband sat solid and steady. In the distance, somewhere I'd never see again, a family I used to belong to dealt with their ghosts. And I was free. I'd paid the debt I owed myself. The debt to the little girl who'd deserved better. The debt to the teenager who'd sacrificed everything. The debt to the young woman who'd kept hoping long past when hope made sense. I'd given us all the life we deserved, the peace we'd earned, the happiness they'd tried to steal. They'd taken my money, my trust, my childhood, but they hadn't broken me, hadn't destroyed me, hadn't won. I'd won. By surviving, by thriving, by refusing to let their cruelty make me cruel. by building something beautiful from the ashes they'd left behind. That was my story. Not a tragedy, not a cautionary tale, not a victim narrative. A triumph, a redemption, a reclamation. I'd taken back everything they'd stolen, and in the process, I'd found something they could never touch, myself. And that was worth more than all the money in the world.